On our extra innings segment, we welcome 1987 JCHS grad, Mr. Barry Johnson, to join us. We're excited to hear his baseball story this afternoon. We're going to kind of be an interview format. I'll be throwing some questions out to Barry. If anybody has their own personal questions, you can go ahead and shoot those in the chat box at the bottom. More than if we have time, take questions to ask Barry. And if any of the other coaches, feel free to jump in if you have anything. So before we get started and kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the interview, Barry, I'm just going to kind of read a little bit of a bio that I took off your guys' website just to give everybody with us to kind of give a little bit of a background. So throughout a distinguished baseball career, Barry Johnson established a reputation for excellence on the pitching mound, attention to detail, and an unsurpassed work ethic. Barry was an all-state pitcher at Joliet Catholic High School. Despite being selected by the New York Mets in the June 1987 amateur draft, he opted to attend college and was a two-time letterman for both Florida State University and the University of Arizona. After a successful amateur career that included 2 trips to the Connie Mack World Series and 2 National Baseball Championships, Barry signed with the Montreal Expos in June of 1991. Over the course of a professional career that spanned 11 seasons, Barry pitched in 7 major league organizations: Expos, White Sox, Pirates, Rangers, Diamondbacks, Yankees, and Phillies. Along the way, he led the White Sox organization in ERA 3 times, 93, 95, and 96, and was the member of 2 league championship teams. After the completion of the 01 campaign, Barry was selected to represent the United States in the 2001 Baseball World Cup held in Taiwan and compiled a 1-0 record for the silver medal winning Team USA. After a 4-year stint in the front office of the Pittsburgh Pirates, Barry currently resides in Northwest Houston. A University of Arizona graduate with a degree in accounting, Barry has remained active in both amateur and professional baseball circles as an associate scout for the Chicago Cubs, Major League Scout for the Inside Edge, Inc., a co-owner of the Metal Chapter Performance and Strength, and is a highly sought-after pitching coach and private instructor. Barry is certified in biomechanics and functional strength coach through the National Pitching Association. So, welcome, Barry. Thank you for being on board. Thanks for joining us.
I am pumped to be here. Again, thanks for reaching out. Happy to be a part of it. Wish the circumstances were different, that you guys were in the middle of a season, but happy to play a part and chat with you guys.
Yeah, definitely. We were really looking forward to this. I know for me too, growing up watching you play. So it's kind of neat to connect with you, and some things even going back to growing up, some questions, and I'm sure we'll touch on all those things today. But I kind of want to just start by a little bit talking about your baseball career, specifically pre-high school. And it just, at Joliet Catholic, we get kids from all over within a 30-mile radius, but we still get our core of players from that Troy, St. Joe's, Whiteford. Still, there's, even with travel baseball, we still get a lot of our core players from the same areas. So, assuming you grew up in Shorewood and Joliet, like, where did you play, like, youth baseball, your grade school, and kind of where did you grow up, and what was your start in baseball in the Joliet area?
Yeah, we moved to the Joliet area right after I finished kindergarten. So first grade, I went to Troy. I played in the Troy Little League. Just growing up through that, I was super young for my grade, and so baseball was always a little bit odd. Once I got into, I guess the first big jump was maybe at the junior high level where the distances changed, but in the summers I had been playing at shorter distances and kind of had that same deal going into high school. But it was always just the Troy Little League. I played at Troy Junior High, had some good teams there. In fact, I was sharing this a little bit earlier. I was all set to go to Joliet West. My brother had gone to Joliet West, and the summer after my 8th grade year was the year that they decided to close Joliet East. And so there were coaches getting filtered all the way around, and there was quite a bit of uncertainty in the whole situation. And I had gone to a basketball camp at Joliet West. It seemed kind of unorganized. I think to nobody's fault. There was just coaches being shuffled around all over the place. And then I also went to a basketball camp that same summer at Joliet Catholic, and that was, Mike Gillespie was the coach, and Terry Gannon had just won a national championship at NC State. And I'm like, whoa, this is fantastic. And so, the push and what ended up making the change from Joliet West to Joliet Catholic was actually basketball more so than baseball. But that was eye-opening, and I had such a great experience at the camp that kind of shifted my focus to Joliet Catholic.
Yeah, I was talking to Tony earlier, and we were kind of goofing around. Like, I know, like, they recently came out with like some all-century teams. Like if Troy ever came out with an all-century team for baseball, that would be one of the most freaking loaded junior highs in the country. It's we just had Aaron on, who's at Troy. Talking to you. Ty Freeman. We still get just some outstanding players out of Troy Junior High that come to JCA. It still has remained just a great feeder for us.
I mean, if I could add to that, if you look out west, it wasn't built up then. Now look at how built up it is. It's unreal. Now imagine combining all of those kids out west into one, dynamic school that we had. Unbelievable. So, that's kind of what happened. Like, I got cut from that team actually, and that level of competition was unbelievable. Even years, a year after and year before is just a thoroughbred of talent, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a 6th grader, I didn't make the team, but then 7th and 8th grade, I did. But again, going back to just my birthday isn't until August. And so I graduated and finished a full summer still as a 17-year-old from high school.
Wow.
So, I was more of a third baseman because the whole pitching thing was a little bit out. Hadn't pitched at that distance that much. And so it finally started to even out a little bit once I did get to high school.
Like what Tony said too, now with all, kids are starting to travel baseball at such a young age, and you think back then, the in-house leagues in the talent, whether it was at Troy or whether it was at St. Joe's, even the guys maybe in your neighborhood that you grew up with, competing with every day. But how did you think, as you already touched on Joliet Catholic a little bit, but how did you think about some of that competition growing up, in our area, prepared you to compete at a high level as you started to enter, your high school years?
Well, I think, going through it, I don't know that you really have, because that's all that's all you've competed against. I think my first, when I played at Troy, I think up until Pony League, and then I was at Goltz Park, and then I think I spent one summer at Ingalls. But, it was only until you kind of left the area and you played some other teams, whether it was even in just the state, that you realized that, hey, we're pretty stinking good here. But when you're growing up and that's all you just kind of assume that that everything's that way. But the more that you played some outside competition and then going on to college and things like that, you realize, we had it going on pretty good in our area and still do.
You kind of already touched on a little bit. I was kind of from here, I was going to kind of lead into, your decision to go to Joliet Catholic, and you already touched on that a little bit and kind of talked about the camp stuff, which is great stuff. I was just kind of curious, had heard about like Mark Grant or like Bill Gullickson or some of these other pitchers that have gone to Joliet Catholic? And have you thought about, any of those guys at all, as a part of your decision?
Like I said, the biggest decision maker still for me was basketball, but
Mhm.
yes, of course, I knew who Bill Gullickson was, Mark Grant. My brother Brent played basketball against Gullickson in high school, and
Okay.
my brother gave me so much crap for being a traitor, I guess, and going to Joliet Catholic. So we still butt heads a little bit on that, but yeah, I was aware of the guys that had come out of there. Again, I saw myself as a basketball player and a third baseman. So
Yeah, right. No, right.
and I'm glad that there were some smarter eyes or smarter brains than mine to kind of steer me in a different direction.
Well, so it must not taken long once you got to Joliet Catholic before they decided to have you pitch. But just because kind of looking at things, your junior year, from a pitching standpoint, you seem to really kind of explode onto the scene. And I actually have some numbers here from your 86 season. As a junior, you posted a 9-1 record, 69 to third innings pitched, 1.51 ERA, 76 Ks, and gave up 62 hits. So as a junior, again, going back to the competition and in our area and the conference and the schedule, Coach Szymanski at that time, I mean, he's not ducking any opponent. I mean,
No.
just like it is now. I mean, we're going after everybody.
Yes.
No,
that was
one interesting thing I just wanted to point out is it said you gave up 62 hits, but out of those 62 hits, 10 of them were doubles. So out of the 62 hits, there's 52 singles and 10 doubles. No triples or home runs.
Limit the damage.
That's kind of a cool statistic. Pretty impressive.
No, that it didn't take too long. Like you said, I think my freshman year I played on the sophomore team with Coach Hunkler. I DH'd a little bit. I played some different positions, but even that year, I was kind of got the idea that I was going to be pitching predominantly. Had a good year that year. Pitched again on the sophomore team. And we were stacked, so it wasn't like I thought that as a sophomore that I could pitch on the varsity club. So another good year as a sophomore, and then that junior year. That's kind of the first inclination that I'm doing okay here because now I'm facing guys that are older than me and holding my own. But I can't say enough about, again, Coach Hunkler and Coach Szymanski and just, you're always more than prepared. And, the actual, I love to compete, but you were so prepared by the time you took the field that it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, and I was kind of you kind of already touched on Carl and Jack a little bit. I talk to Jack a lot. I know I make sure I get him a JC hat. He's been extremely, supportive since my time coaching there. Same thing with Carl. We talked to him a lot. He just retired a couple years ago from baseball at Naperville North. So we've seen him more and more coming out to like alumni banquets and stuff like that,
Awesome.
But those are good guys. Great baseball guys. I know my brother specifically always talked like super high when it came to Carl.
Yep.
Loved him.
Yeah, I was going to say that very, very blessed. And you guys have obviously taken the tradition and just run with it. But there's a history of coaches that, over delivered to me, and you guys are doing the same. And so it's just awesome to see it continuing.
And then I don't know if you've seen also, we have with us Coach Rodiguero, Joe Rodiguero. He was actually my head coach when I was at Joliet Catholic, and then he's back now. He's about to retire, I believe, but he's still coaching baseball. We got him brought back over at Joliet Catholic. So
awesome.
kind of a cool network that we got going.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. So then as a senior, looks like you just kind of you picked up where you left off as far as numbers go. And I think this is about the same time I first saw you really pitch as a baseball player, because I think my brother was a junior at the time, and I remember going out to a game, and I mean, yeah, but you looked the part as a major leaguer as a senior in high school. I mean, how big were you? You had to be 6'4", you think, as a senior in high school? I mean, you were a big dude.
I was 6'4" and a kind of a soft 215, I think, or something like that. But yeah, I certainly benefited from kind of fitting the mold, if you will, for a pitcher. Still, knowing what I know now, I was pretty green at the time. But like I said, there was nothing that I loved to do more than compete, and had a blast with it. And we had, good teams, stacked teams that we just couldn't get out of our regional for whatever reason.
Yeah, well, that's kind of leading into my next thing. But is how tough the regionals were back then. Not that they're not tough now, but the format's different. I mean, there's 4 classes now compared to 2 classes when you played. And even when I first started coaching, there was 2 classes, and you needed to win 3 games to win a regional championship. Nowadays, you only got to win 2 games to win a regional championship. And you were walking into just a buzzsaw with Providence and Lockport, Nooka, Joliet, Point, whoever. And again, just going back to how our area and how stacked our area was, and everybody was good, and you needed some luck, and it's amazing. But there was no, it's different. But if you look back and you think about making it to those regional championships at Lockport High School or at Ingles Park, and you think about the amount of people that came out to watch those games and the crowd, and somebody had to win, somebody had to lose. It's baseball, right? But just the atmosphere in some of those situations is just absolutely incredible,
Yeah, without a doubt. It was, again, we were playing in the ESCC, and so we didn't get a whole lot of opportunity to go head to head with a Lockport or a Joliet West until we got to the regional. So I mean, but yeah, Lockport had our number. I tip my hat, but man, my memory may not be 100% correct, but I think my senior year, 3 of the top 10 teams in the state were in our region with us, and Providence and Lockport. And it was it was going to be tough whoever got out of there was going to run quite a while.
It's going to go, and thankfully elimination,
I can intervene for a second on the other end of the spectrum. I remember I did go to West, and I'll tell you what, I remember preparing to play you guys, and we're going, okay, who are we going to face? Scheffler, Johnson, Mahalik,
Bergman, Grace.
Grace, like, okay, well, Johnson's a 12-6 guy, Mahalik's a slow lefty. It's like all these different guys, like, oh my God. So I mean, unbelievable,
I think I was sharing with Mark before we got started. The pitching staff from my senior year, myself ended up playing pro ball. We had 3 guys pitch in the big leagues. Jim Kleppe, who was a senior with me, he was a D2 All-American. Jim Scheffler played pro ball. And it's like we're pretty stacked as a pitching staff. Now, none of us we all went to college first. It's not like we all drafted and went right out, but at the same time, there was some pretty good talent there.
Barry, like, I know you talked about your basketball background and third base and this. So as you got to like that senior year, I mean, what pitches did you throw? I mean, were you just kind of a fastball, curveball? Like, and I know it sounds like you're kind of still kind of coming into your own with everything, but
a little bit. I was fastball, a not very good curve, and I threw a split finger my senior year. which disappeared when I went to college somewhere. But yeah, it was just those basic three. But yeah, I got a lot of, I mean, would obviously use the secondary pitches more so maybe for put away type of thing, because I had enough velocity at that time where I didn't have to deviate a whole lot from that, but primarily four seam, and that continued throughout my career. But yeah, four seam curveball and a split finger I used as a changeup.
Hey Jared, we have a question from the audience. If Barry could talk about, we see today specialization in a individual sport. You talked about playing hoops, played third base, and you end up being a pro pitcher. What's your thoughts, with all this specialization going on today? I'll
answer it a couple of ways. But just personally, whatever season it was, that's what I was playing. I played Joliet Raiders football. In junior high, baseball was a fall sport, so I was playing baseball in the fall, basketball in the winter, and then I would throw the discus and shot put in the spring for track. And what I think it did for me is, it kind of helps mentally with the burnout factor, but it gets you, and I see this a lot now with the athletes that we work with, it gets you out of the same movement pattern. It kind of allows you to be a little bit more of a well-rounded athlete. When we first moved to Houston and started working with high school athletes, we were seeing a lot of basically adult type overuse injuries in high school kids. And then you kind of drill down, and they are in season year round. Their PE class is now baseball class. And it's, private lessons and everything on top of that just kind of winds you into these overuse patterns that or repetitive movement patterns that end up in some overuse injuries. So I believe, it wasn't until my senior year of high school that I stopped playing basketball. It just, I think it benefited me to be a little bit more of a well-rounded athlete. It got me into some different movement patterns, like I said, and I certainly didn't lose anything on the baseball side. I don't know. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, good. That was real good. No, appreciate that.
Now, down here in Houston, it's a little bit more challenging because baseball starts so early that there is some overlap, a lot of overlap with basketball. And so it's really tough for guys to do both and not be playing big time catch up when baseball season starts. So what we've seen a lot more here is that there's football, baseball guys, if there is, but it is alarming a little bit at the push to specialize at such an early age.
Do you know when the high school season starts in Texas? Does it start? I think maybe February, early February.
Yeah, I was gonna say they get right at not too long after you get back from Christmas break, and then they'll start practicing, and then they go right into tournaments. And like I said, they had already started by the time all the coronavirus stuff hit down here. So they had 2 or 3 weeks in at least. Yeah.
To add to that point as well, I think what you're seeing is the specialization thing is really kind of, you're seeing the rivalries disappear, the local rivalries, because everyone's playing one sport instead of playing basketball, playing football, and having those competition and friendships amongst other schools. Now it's just really, you get to see that team one time a year, versus seeing them several times a year, so you can, talk smack in the other segments, I guess you can call it. But now it's a little bit different. So, that's concerning to me as well, because I think that you're not getting your best products in other sports. I think athletes should play as many as possible, if you ask me.
Yeah, I'm certainly support that. But I also understand on the other side of things that there are pressures coming from lots of different directions to have you zero in. But I'd like to. I don't have kids of my own, but I'd like to think if I did, that I would encourage, playing multiple sports. There'll ultimately be a time to specialize, but it doesn't need to be, when you're 12.
Right. Going back around this time too, when you were in high school, you played on one of the best travel teams that I think ever existed. I believe you guys were the Lansing Angels. And I was running around, who knows, around that time, but it was literally an all-star team of players from all over. I know, I remember like a Jason Robertson from Hillcrest,
Mm-hmm.
played for the
Hillcrest.
Yankees. You had Bergman, I think, played, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did the catcher from St. Rita.
Yep, Jack Johnson. He
Jack
was my
Johnson.
catcher out at Arizona as well.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Billy Mondrella, my brother, John Simmons. I mean, just an
Yep.
endless list of players. And I think the goal was, it was a Connie Mack to get to Farmington, to get to New Mexico. So kind of I just wanted to talk about is, like, do you remember how that team kind of came about and how you guys all came together and what ended up happening, postseason wise? I think you guys did go to Farmington.
Yeah, we went both years that I played. Yeah. I think it might have been in existence 1 year before I played. And again, going back, I was 17 when I graduated from high school. So I actually went to my freshman year at Florida State and came back and played another summer after my freshman year of college. Because I was still 18.
Oh, wow.
But the head coach was Ron Guageni from Marian Catholic, and I don't know this for 100% fact, but his son was a second baseman, and it was really kind of ahead of its time. I played one summer with the Joliet Jaguars, which was a American Legion team, and we ran into issues with like adding up the enrollments from the different high schools, and we ended up winning the state tournament, but then getting kicked out because I guess the total enrollment was too high. So, Connie Mack didn't have those restrictions. And so Coach Guageni was able to basically go around the Chicago area and just cherry pick the best guys. And we traveled up to Minnesota. We traveled to Memphis. I forget all the different tournaments that we went to, but obviously the goal was the Connie Mack World Series. And we made it out there both years that I played, and we lost in the championship game my second year. But yeah, that was, it certainly opened up some exposure to a lot of guys. I mean, I think everybody in our lineup ended up at a Division I school. Coach Guageni's son, once he finished, I think the Angels shut down, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it was, every tournament we went to, because we were not just good, but we were huge. And so we would have constantly our birth certificates getting checked. The guy who got it the most was Jason Robertson, and he was only a sophomore, I think, at the time. He was only 16.
Wow.
So yeah, that was those were two really, really fun summers.
I heard that I never been. I didn't make it out when you guys went out there. But the tournament in Farmington, New Mexico, is supposed to be quite the experience.
It is. I mean, you land and you get met by a police escort, and you get driven into Farmington. Everybody takes off work. I mean, it is their event of the summer. They have a big parade, and everybody's out there, and the ballpark's packed. And during that time, I don't know where I think it's Ricketts Park is the name of the ballpark out there, but the whoever decides what the best playing surfaces is in amateur baseball, it was voted the best, playing surface a couple of years, and one of the years that I was out there. I mean, it was just a beautiful ballpark. The whole community is involved in, and really good competition. You've got teams from all over the place.
Awesome. Well, kind of want to circle back a little bit to your senior year. Another one of your former teammates is also coaches baseball with us, Bart Kemp. He wanted me to have you talk about your right-handed pickoff move to first base. He said it was the best one he's ever seen.
No, that was, I was just thinking about this the other day. Coach Szymanski, we had a verbal sign out of the dugout, was get us out of the inning. And if we had a guy on third base, and he would kind of zero in on that runner on third base and on how he started to take his walking lead. And so if his first step was a crossover step, even if he didn't, even if he wasn't that far off the base, gosh, fortunately didn't have a ton of guys on third base, but got a bunch of huge outs with that. And the umpires, you're dealing with a 2-umpire crew, typically one behind home plate and one that's standing out, and shortstop, so he can't see. So you could take a few liberties a little bit with your, with that move to third. But I can't tell you how many times in, my 2 years on the varsity that we used that play. And I every time there was a guy on third, I'm like, listen, get us out of the inning. And it was hat to belt was our thing. I still remember it to this day. But yeah, we got some big outs.
Well, they had to be demoralizing because, like you said, probably not a lot of guys get to third. They finally get a chance to get a guy in scoring position, and then he gets picked. Huge
momentum swings on that. And like I said, I don't know that it ever didn't work because coach was keeping an eye on that runner on third base, and he didn't even have to be going nuts. It's just how he started to take that walking lead.
Yeah, I guess if he noticed if you were lifting and he started crossing over, on your lift, he was done.
Yeah. It was just frozen pizza. It was just to deliver the ball and apply the tag. There wasn't like he was diving back in there. Occasionally we'd have a rundown, but it was usually just frozen in place and apply a tag.
I'm impressed you remember the verbal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've benefited from it.
I'm sure if I started throwing out ducks on a pond or this time or might ring a bell for you,
Absolutely.
Now, today, when it comes to recruiting for a lot of guys, the recruiting is starting earlier and earlier. And out in our area, it's not, if a kid from around here is going to a college in Florida or going to a college in Arizona or California, you don't really bat an eye today. But back when you were a senior, you're committing to Florida State, and that didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
How did that come about, that recruitment process for you to end up there?
I mentioned my brother earlier who played basketball against Bill Gullickson. My brother's 10 years older than me, so I wanted to do everything exactly like him. So he wore 31, so I wore 31 in high school. He went to Florida State, not as an athlete, but just as a student. So that was where I wanted to go. And when I figured out that they play football or they play baseball there, and that's where I want to go. So fortunately, I was blessed that my parents were, allowed me to attend Mike Martin baseball camps. And so I kind of put myself in front of them.
Okay.
Otherwise, I don't think that they were going to make a trip up to Joliet. So the summer after, I guess it was my junior year, they invited me they had a Seminole Select camp. And, I was, that ended up kind of sealing the deal for Florida State, but it also got me some attention. I had visits planned to Clemson and Auburn and Georgia, that all kind of came out of that, putting myself in front of Florida State and then getting invited to that select camp.
And then you were also drafted by the Mets out of high school. I know you ended up going to Florida State, but your senior year, what were you hearing about the draft?
Funny, the senior year was kind of weird. I mentioned that I stopped playing basketball. And with the idea, I've got my scholarship in place already. I don't want to do anything stupid. So what did I do? I did something stupid. I got together an intramural basketball team and of guys that had one time or another been on the basketball team at Joliet Catholic. And so we had fun, and the championship game of the intramural basketball season, I break my foot. So Coach Szymanski was not thrilled with me at that point because it cost me probably the first 3 weeks maybe of the season.
Okay.
I was still trying to throw bullpens with a cast on up to my knee. But yeah, there were some scouts in the stands, and I it's hard not to notice that when it's there.
Sure.
I didn't have a whole lot of interaction with the Mets. Another kind of odd story. I grew up a White Sox fan and just despised the Cubs, and so at that time the Mets and the Cubs were big rivals. I was a big Dwight Gooden fan. And so, to end up being drafted by the Mets was a pretty big thrill. I was so naive to the process. I can't say that I was expecting to get drafted. I got drafted really late. And they ended up kind of doing a draft and follow where they watched me pitch that summer. And then I think it was the day before I was going to attend my first classes at Florida State, they finally made an offer, and it was a nice offer for the round that I went in. But I'm glad that I didn't go at that time. I wasn't developed enough, and knowing what I know now, I wasn't mature enough at that point. But I was thrilled to death, and funny how it's different now. I actually got, and this makes me sound even older than I am, but I got a telegram to let me know that I got drafted. I mean, there wasn't, MLB draft Twitter and things that you could follow. I got a dang telegram, but yeah, it was a thrill, but I had blinders on. Nothing I wanted to do more than to go to Florida State.
So I was just kind of, we all know about the Florida State baseball program, but I know earlier we were talking about like how hard baseball is, and it was just talking about like Mike Martin. I was just like looking up, and I kind of knew this already, but I just kind of wanted to confirm the numbers. By the time he retired, as of recently, he retired with over 2,000 wins, college baseball Hall of Fame coach, 17 College World Series appearances, and unfortunately no championships for him. But that's just absolutely how hard baseball is, and just an amazing statistics that he was in Omaha that many times and couldn't come away with one.
Yeah, that was it was great to get a chance to play for him. It was a little bit of an odd situation. I was part of a recruiting class that was ranked really high. There were 4 other right-handed pitchers that had been drafted in that recruiting class. Florida State was not in the ACC at that time. We were in the Metro Conference, which wasn't terribly competitive. And so I really didn't get an opportunity to contribute early on. Kind of got lost in the shuffle. Also, was just the guy who, did what he was told, but I kind of blended into the background there. And so there were definitely some lessons learned for me. In terms of dealing with some failure and some setbacks and things like that. In fact, I made every road trip as a freshman, every road trip as a sophomore. We got beat in the regional final my freshman year. My sophomore year, they went to the World Series, but they cut the roster down, and I was part of that cut. So that was kind of the final straw for me in terms of transferring, but a lot of good friends. It's still, I'm still a wacko Florida State guy. In fact, I went there and prior to spring training, to work out, and I didn't burn any bridges. But a lot of respect for Coach Martin. The pitching coach there was Mike McLeod, who's now at Tallahassee Community College. And he was really a guru in developing secondary pitches, and took my really mediocre curveball and even though I didn't do a whole lot for 2 years at Florida State, I really developed a plus curveball that served me well all through my pro career.
Yeah, that's kind of Ken already answered. I was just going to kind of ask you, what type of it once you got and learned after coming from high school that you couldn't just blow the ball by everybody or whatever. What were some of the adjustments that you had to make to compete at that high level of college baseball? It sounds like the curveball was one of them, you know?
Curveball was one of them for sure. One of the things that that I learned during that time, I did some things well in high school, just I guess kind of naturally. I didn't know, I didn't have a real good sense of kind of where home was. So every suggestion that they would make, and there was one period of time it was take away my curveball, give me a slider, take away the slider, give me back the curveball. The split finger went away. They had me throwing across my body intentionally for a period of time. And I kind of had to rediscover what I did well or where home was a little bit, because I was nothing wrong with being coachable, but I would implement 100% the things that I was being suggested. And it's not that they were doing it out of anything other than trying to help me, but I ended up kind of lost there for a little bit.
Yeah.
But fortunately I had it was probably the biggest summer for me was that summer after my freshman year, to come back and play for the Angels one more time and kind of settle into and kind of rediscover where home was and where I was the most efficient.
So, oh yeah, another thing I wanted to bring up too is that I know for like a lot of our guys that even now currently, when you go into not just a big time college program, almost any college program as a pitcher, you may be so used to being a starter, but now you're a freshman in college and you're kind of back down at the bottom of the totem pole, and you may have to start out coming out of the bullpen and work your way, into a starter's role. So that's one of the huge adjustments that I think that a lot of young players have to make going from high school to college. Were you in that same situation at all? And what did you have to learn about that and taking on maybe a different role?
Well, absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. I think at the time I kind of had it all figured out, how it was going to work out. And then you realize that all of a sudden everybody's pretty darn good. So it makes you reevaluate, and it's uncommon for a guy to step into a college program. I mean, you're talking about some pretty big developmental years right there, where from playing against other 18 or 17-year-olds to now you're playing against 21, 22-year-olds. Those are some grown men
Yeah.
in comparison. And so, that was absolutely an adjustment. That was, it was tough for me for sure. But like I said, kind of going back to experiencing some setbacks, experiencing some failures, and reevaluating, doubling down your work ethic and those type of things to kind of overcome those challenges. Had I signed out of high school, I would not have been prepared to deal with it. And so when that college experience, I mean, you can look through my college numbers, they're not particularly pretty, but there's a lot of lessons learned there. And one of them, and I try to share it with the guys that I work with, is the expectation for you to be the man at whatever your high school is, and to be the man at Texas A&M or wherever, any four-year school. Hey, let's keep our expectations in perspective, because it might be a year or two, and those developmental years will serve you well.
Yeah.
Not to mention, and you mentioned the different roles. Yes, I had never pitched out of the bullpen, so that was new for me. It's a little different at the college game than at the professional level in terms of roles and things like that. But that was a whole new experience of coming in with traffic on the bases and things like that.
Hey, Jared, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, caller.
How was the transition going from, from the house that you grew up in into the college environment? Was it good, or was it challenging? Did it affect some of your growth?
I was fortunate in that my brother Brent, who went to Florida State, still lived in Tallahassee, and so it's nice, if you're an athlete, you automatically have a group of whatever it is, 25 or 30 guys that, you know, a ready-made circle of friends. But what helped me out a ton was that my brother was there, and so I could run over to his house on a weekend, get a home cooked meal. And there was, you know, I was 1,000 miles away from home, but I had a little piece of home that was just basically down the street. So that helped me a lot. But yeah, I think, you know, on top of that, just kind of fending for yourself a little bit. It's, you know, even if you have meals provided, you know, how do you do laundry? I mean, the class schedule and taking care of your time and make sure that you're efficient. I can't say that I was always great about it, but certainly there's some lessons that were learned there that serve you well as you go down the line. I'm so glad I went the college route, just to experience some of that, so that, you know, when it does become pro baseball, I know I wasn't ready as a 17-year-old for sure.
So you decide you like your heat dry, not humid. So you make the move and you head out to Arizona. And there again, you know, just you know, I love college baseball. I watch the College World Series every year. You know, I you know, I try to get to some of the ABCA clinics and hear different guys. So you go from Mike Martin to Jerry Kimball, who's another Hall of Fame, you know, well-known baseball coach, no longer with us, passed away,
Yeah.
But still a Hall of Fame baseball coach. And I had seen some things that supposedly the guy had a pretty great personality and was a good storyteller. I don't know if
Yeah, I was going to say that my two college coaches, Mike Martin might have been the best in-game coach maybe that I played for ever. I mean, he would pull the right strings at the right times, and Coach Kendall was an absolute stickler for fundamentals. I mean, if you watched any Arizona team play during his time, they were absolutely rock solid at the fundamentals. And so, you know, we didn't have as great a 2 years as I would like, but I was very fortunate to have played for both of those guys. You know, when I made the decision to leave Florida State, I had in mind that Wichita State had just won the College World Series in '89, and I was going to be playing there in the Jayhawk League. And so that was kind of what I had my mind on. But Jack Johnson from St. Rita, that was on those Angels teams, he had gone out to Arizona as a freshman, and he kind of helped facilitate that deal, and I ended up out in Tucson. But I visited University of Illinois. Augie Garrido was there at the time. That was one of the options. Southern Illinois was another one of the options, and I never even did get to talk to Wichita State. But again, jumped from one end of the country to the other, but got to play some phenomenal competition in the Pac-10 at the time, and probably didn't run into that caliber of competition until I was, you know, a couple levels into minor league baseball.
cool. So as you know, you're ready, your college eligibility's up, and then your first team were drafted by Montreal. How did that work from transitioning from your college career to your pro career?
Gotcha. Yeah, I was going to say my path to professional baseball was certainly not what I had expected. Kind of fell off the radar after 2 years at Florida State. Got an opportunity to pitch a ton my junior year at Arizona, and knowing what I know now too much, we were pretty depleted as a pitching staff, and so I began the year as our Saturday starter. Two conference series into the season, our bullpen was struggling, and so what they did is they had me close Friday and Saturday, and if I hadn't thrown too much, I would start on Sunday. And by the end of that year, I was not in real good shape arm-wise, and that summer started having some issues with my elbow, and 4 or 5 doctor visits visits, and after, I was diagnosed with every form of tendonitis known to man. And the stigma attached to tendonitis was, here's some anti-inflammatory, suck it up. And so I limped through my senior year basically on Advil. And, my junior year, I had talked to quite a few scouts. They had talked about somewhere around the 10th round, and I don't know what happened, but I fell all the way out of the draft. My senior year, I didn't expect to get an opportunity. But again, going back to Jack Johnson, his dad was a lower level scout for the Expos, and so the draft came and went, and they had a roster spot in rookie ball that they needed to fill. So I signed for nothing, a non-drafted free agent. Again, huge blessing. I ended up having surgery. I had a fractured elbow the whole time. So, I wanted to go back and visit all the people who had told me tendonitis and made me feel bad for, not trying to push through, but it was just purely an overuse injury from that season and probably leading up to it. But it was my first experience at year-round throwing, and our maintenance program and things like that weren't all that extensive, let's put it that way. So it got my foot in the door with the Expos. I pitched a couple times, elbow completely blew out. They gave me a surgery, rehabbed me, and released me before I ever went to a spring training with them. But it was a huge blessing, like I said, to get my foot in the door, get my elbow figured out. And then spring of '92, I went to a tryout camp, just an open tryout camp with the White Sox down at their spring training facility. And I was one of two guys signed out of it, and the other guy got released by the end of spring training, and I tricked him and played 11 years. So it worked out okay.
Yeah, that's great. So you go, well, when you got healthy, things must have worked out pretty good for you because you didn't spend, when I was looking at things, for only like maybe 2 years, you were at like a single A level. Then for 2 years, you were already at, double A, and then, double A and triple A. But it seemed like you moved pretty fast once you got healthy.
I did. That first full year I was in South Bend, and that was pretty cool. My folks were able to, I was starting at the time, so my folks were able to come through the Midwest League and see just about all my starts. The following year I was in high A for half the year, and then, got moved up to double A. So yeah, that at least getting through those first couple humps went pretty quick. I never had another huge blessing was the White Sox were probably 10 or 15 years ahead of every other organization in terms of strength and conditioning, arm care. And so I couldn't have landed in a better place. Plus, my childhood favorite team.
Right.
But I ended up playing quite a few more organizations after the White Sox, and all of them were behind where the White Sox were in 1992. So that was huge for me, and kind of was a career saver, truthfully.
Because I was looking too, well, in your bio, I didn't realize either. They said some of your best years were 93, 95, and 96, and then I look at 94, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was great. Their baseball wasn't played, so you were in the middle of that during the 94 season.
Yeah, that well, on top of Michael Jordan being there, I mean, that was like the perfect storm. I mean, the major leaguers go on strike. Michael Jordan's in Birmingham. I'm, on the team the whole year. Didn't experience anything before or after that even comes close to that in terms of attendance, media, you name it. It was something that you don't experience in the minor leagues, and I was pretty blessed to be a part of that whole situation. It was kind of surreal, being a Chicago kid playing for the White Sox, teammates with MJ, and but yet, trying to put the being a fan aside, and I was still trying to climb the ladder and get to the big leagues.
Yeah. So, with the Last Dance stuff coming out, and I think this weekend they're going to talk about his time in Birmingham. It seems like by watching the previews or whatever. So you were there during that time, and then did you guys hear some buzz about what might be happening, or did you have any idea like before he got there? What did you know? And
Didn't really. I mean, in terms of him going to Birmingham and being teammates with him. We didn't know really until the end of spring training where he was going to land. It kind of made sense to pick Birmingham. At the time, it was our best facility in the minor leagues, nicest facility, and it got him into a situation where, and I didn't realize this until I was actually living it every day, but just all the coordination that took place just from him to get from point A to point B. I mean, to walk across, some of the clubhouses weren't attached to the field, and so or to the dugout, and so there were police escorts, and couldn't park his car in the regular parking lot, couldn't go out to dinner without calling ahead and closing off a room. I mean, just some of those things. So Birmingham was probably best in terms of to accommodate the onslaught of some of the other stuff. But yeah, it was pretty big thrill. I found myself, a normal spring training day, once you get into games, if you're not pitching that day, you would work out in the morning, or you do your work in the morning, do your weight training, conditioning, have lunch, but I found myself sticking around to watch him play.
Did he get you involved in any of his card games or anything, or?
I didn't get involved in any of the card games, but everything we did had something riding on it for sure. Whether it was a ping pong game, we had a Nerf basketball hoop in our clubhouse. I think, our manager was Terry Francona, and I think Tito paid for his rent all summer by beating Jordan in Yahtzee. But everything had something riding on it. We had, there was a Latin American catcher who was still learning English, and so MJ would give him a list of words to learn overnight, and would ask him to spell one of them when he got back the next day. And if he got it right, he got $100. I'm like, give me a word.
Give me a word in Spanish.
That's like a week's pay. But no, it was when they talk about the fact that, I mean, there's crazy competitor and everything had something riding on it.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I remember hearing too that, I mean, for, I guess, the best he could possibly do, because kind of difficult with the circus that was always around him, but he kind of wanted to be treated, he was a pretty humble guy and wanted to be treated just like by like a regular teammate.
Absolutely. I mean, super respectful for the game. And I think Terry Francona was the ideal guy. I had an opportunity to play for Francona 92, 93, 94, 95 with the Phillies, and then with Team USA also. And there's nobody better at being able to manage personalities and make everybody, he's great with communication and getting everybody pulling in the right direction. And MJ came in and was as much, easily as much one of the guys as anybody else, and still be Michael Jordan, obviously. But far and away the hardest working guy I've ever been around. You couldn't beat him to the ballpark. He was taking extra swings before batting practice, finish the game, and he's still there taking hacks after the game was over. And that was motivating to me. I mean, I've always taken a lot of pride in the work that I put in, and to see a guy who, like, if you look at his bank account, he didn't need to work that hard, but I mean, he was able to close the gap from when I first saw him play at the first parts of spring training to the end of the season, pretty remarkably.
So I know you mentioned Terry Francona being your manager in Birmingham, and then having him in winning the silver medal with him in international competition. and then obviously he goes on and continues and becomes a World Series manager. And what did you know? Did you kind of see that a little bit, like that personality in Francona? I mean, I picked up a Terry Francona book a few years back and read it. He just seemed like a very down to earth guy, just like
Yeah.
a guy that you could hang out with and relate to. It just seemed like an overall, just real genuine, good dude. So did that surprise you that much, seeing his success?
I knew. I mean, I had a feeling it would be tough for him in Philadelphia when he got his first manager gig, because he was in charge of a rebuilding. And they got better, I think, the first 2 or 3 years, and with a really young team. And if he had, you still are as good as, to a certain extent, as good as the people that you have. But, in terms of a perfect guy to manage some of the craziness in Boston with Pedro Martinez and Manny Ramirez and Johnny Damons and those type of things, I had a feeling he would have no problem there. Really good communicator. Like I said, he had a knack of being able to take the last guy on the bench and make him feel important, that his role mattered. Always maintained his authority, but he genuinely cared about what was going on with you. We had very simple rules: be on time, bust your butt, and respect the game. And he would hold your feet to the fire if that wasn't the case. But everybody wanted to play hard for him, and he was great at getting everybody pulling in the same direction. So, I've very fortunate from a very young age all the way through my career to play for some of the best in the game.
Awesome. Kind of finishing up your major league career, I got to throw this out at you and see what you think. If MLB baseball came up to you today and said, we just have a group of 18 to 21-year-olds or whatever recently drafted players, and we're going to put you in a room, and we want you to say a few words to these guys as they start their professional career, coming from a guy that spent 11 years playing professionally. Just a few sentences, just what would be some words of advice or some any insight that, again, like you mentioned a couple of times, knowing now, from back then and going through it, what could you give to these newly drafted players that may potentially stick with them to help them?
I think one of the biggest things, and anybody who's played the game of baseball realizes that there's so much that's out of your control. And so as tough as it may be at times, to zero in on the things that you can control: your preparation, your work, and your execution. And at the end of the day, if you can take care of those things, you're going to be okay. You're going to be able to look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day. I had a pitching coach. Well, it's Don Cooper, who's the big league pitching coach for the White Sox. Little one-liner that always stuck with me: never let something that you can control keep you from getting to the big leagues. So my deal was, I'm going to field the heck out of my position. I'm going to back up every base. I'm going to be where I'm supposed to be. I'm going to work when nobody's looking. Those are all things that I can control. I can't control decisions or whether I get called up or put on a 40-man roster, or even after I execute a pitch, if it's put in play or fielded or thrown away or whatever. Take care of the things that you can control, and don't let something like that keep you from climbing the level or getting to where you want to be. And that
Awesome.
I mean, like I said, that one served me well. So, when guys were going through covering first base in spring training at 50%, I'm like, at some point there's going to be a leadoff hitter that's going to tap one to the first base. He's not going to be going 50%. So I better have a feel for what it's like to blow doors over there and get over and cover first base. And so I was kind of nerdy that way, but it served me well.
Awesome. One last question before we move on to talking about, after baseball and getting into the front office and taking on a different role. During that time also, when you were on the mound, you were a pitcher. Did you ever, look across at the guy in the batter's box and say to yourself, that dude's juicing. He's got to be juiced on. I mean,
without a doubt. During that era, it was, you have to understand that if you were on a Major League 40-man roster and you were, if you were selected in a random drug test in the minor leagues, you could say nope. And you were instructed to say nope. So I was never in that position. I never messed with this stuff. And so it was always interesting how often my name would come up in a random drug test because they knew I would be clean. But yeah, I played against Jason Giambi. We finished the season one year. We started the season the next year playing him pretty early on. I'm like, holy cow, what the heck? Because I mean, I'm putting on maybe 5 pounds or so of good weight, working my maybe 10 in some cases, and then all of a sudden these guys would blow up. But yeah, it was pretty eye-opening. There were guys. If there ever came out to be a definitive list of everybody who did or didn't, I knew some people would be surprised at how many pitchers were actually doing it as well. And then we've heard spatterings over the years, but it was pretty prevalent. And some of the guys was teammates with one. I won't say a name, but was from a Latin American country, lived at home on a dirt floor, and if he can roll the dice, and I don't condone it, but it was going on a lot, and it was in fact, I had more than one person because I wasn't a crazy hard thrower. I might touch 93, but I live 90, 91. Hey, you might consider doing this. I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. Kind of going back. I mean, if I had the opportunity to pitch in the big leagues, I wanted it to be legit. So I didn't want to cut corners that way. When it came down to you talked about the Jordan year, and then the following spring, they were threatening to start the season with replacement players. I got kicked out of spring training because I told the White Sox no, I wasn't going to do it. And that was another shortcut. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but leading into Jordan going back to baseball, I got kicked out. Like 3 days later, they started tightening the screws on him. And I don't know at some point if he would have gone back to basketball, but he wasn't going back then. So anyway, I'm getting away from my point.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want something. I wanted to be able to look at myself in the mirror and know that I did it the right way.
Awesome.
Hey, Jared, do you mind if I ask one?
Go ahead, caller.
All right. This is Ryan Quigley, Barry.
Hey, Ryan.
Yeah, just a quick question because we have some of our pitchers listening.
Awesome.
And some of these kids they'll see the recording of this too. You mentioned Don Cooper, but like Kirk Champion and like some of the pitching minds that you were around. Not a specific mechanical question, but these kids, they go from like their private coach, me and Coach Seifert at school. They'll play for a college coach. You're going to run across so many different pitching coaches throughout your career. Can you kind of tell them how you navigated that, like going from, trying to be yourself, but also take instruction? Because Aaron Capissa talked about that a little bit, how, too many people in his ear might have messed him up a little bit, but just how you become your own pitching coach throughout that process pretty much.
Well, like I said, I think it's important to ask questions. And one of the things when I'm working with guys is I'll ask a lot of questions and Aaron touched on it as well, about being able to feel certain things. And, if you're just trying to find a balance between you don't want to, hey, I've got it all figured out and I'm going to tune you out completely. Absolutely not. This person has good intentions of finding, seeing something that he wants to improve. And so I'm willing to try some things, but it was try anything for sure. But what helped me out a ton was getting having a good enough feel for what I did well, and then to make those subtle adjustments, it was easier to, what's the right word? To adjust it off of that. And it's even when you're going through a rough time, if you have that good feel, it makes a good, makes it a little easier to make adjustments or to find that home if you've gotten out of whack a little bit. But yeah, just understanding that, you know, I don't know that I ran into anybody that was intentionally trying to mess me up. Folks have some really good intentions, and you know, there are some smart folks that, you know, I want to give it a shot. So whether it's a bullpen or a subtle change in a grip or something like that, yeah, I was all for it. But it certainly helped me out a lot, where I knew where I could come back to, if it didn't fit, that I could come back to what I could execute. I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully it comes close.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Really good. Thank you. Great question, Quigs.
Thank you.
How was that how did that come about with the front office with the Pirates, and how was that, you know, going from, you know, being on the field to kind of seeing some of the background, you know, in regards to a Major League Baseball organization?
Yeah, it's been pretty cool. My ex-wife was in medical school, and she finished up and was going to be doing a fellowship in Pittsburgh, and the GM in Pittsburgh at the time was Dave Littlefield. And going all the way back to that Florida State select camp, he was an assistant coach at Clemson for a period of time before he got into scouting and started climbing the front office ranks. And so I reached out to him, and we were able to put together a job position that kind of took advantage of a lot of my skills. So I would spend mornings in baseball operations, and then afternoons in the finance department. And then during the season, I would have in-game duties. But you know, it was just that connection that I had maintained over the years, and that's, like I said, I'm fortunate to have run across a lot of really good folks and maintained a lot of relationships. And I encourage folks to do it as you go, even if you have not the greatest experience somewhere, to not burn bridges, because you don't know when that relationship will come in handy. So to nurture those things as you're going along. But Dave helped me out. The Pirates did not have a true advanced scout at the time, and this was kind of at the beginning stages of some of the analytics. And so my job for the 05 season was I put together our pitching plans for that entire season. But it was interesting. Our coaching staff at the time was very, very old school. So I had all this data that I could provide, and tendencies and things like that, but they weren't terribly receptive to it. But it was a blast. It was a lot of work, but I really enjoyed it, because that was kind of what I got into, was breaking down hitters and how to attack them. And so I did that for a year. Working primarily with the pitching coach and the bullpen coach. And then did some things from time to time, like I guess the position now is replay coordinator. Back then it was called a video coordinator. And so they would take the live broadcast of the game and edit out pitch by pitch and attach the data to it. And then there's a computer down by the dugout where guys could come in and watch their at bats afterwards, or a pitcher could watch their innings, and, you know, those type of things. And so I would help with that, because the guy doing that didn't have a huge baseball background. And so, you know, it's kind of important to know, hey, well, that was a slider, you know, you want to get that part right, or whatever the case may be. But kind of helped him get up to speed. And so yeah, that was a fun. I got to see kind of behind the scenes on the baseball side, but I also got to see behind the scenes on the financial side. And the Pirates ran a really tight ship. I was part of the accounting department, so as well, and they, our CFO would give a dollar amount that we could spend to pay bills so that we could make payroll every 2 weeks. And so, I mean, it was that tight of a ship during those years. So it was interesting to see that side of things and how much money was being paid for guys that aren't even playing for them anymore. And they've had a little bit of an ownership change. So they've opened up, because I think they were even pretty tight when it came to paying for, the draft picks and things like that. So they've opened that up, and they've had a pretty decent run of success here, at least better than during the time that I was there.
Very interesting. So eventually, you make your way to Houston, and you start a facility. I just wanted to add in is I think you guys have the best logo ever. I love it.
It's interesting. We moved down here, and that wasn't even on our radar as to open up. Now, my wife she's the brains of the operation for sure. She was a collegiate strength coach for many, many years, and she took a job with Houston Baptist University. They were going to be making a jump from an NAIA school to a D1 school, and they really didn't have much of a strength and conditioning program. So they brought her down to kind of ramp things up. I was able to interview and get hired for a job with the Astros. It was kind of a lateral move for me. I wasn't a real mission critical guy, so they helped me find a place to stay. And then when it was time for me to start, they had absorbed most of my job description, and so I was left with a part-time job. So I ended up not ever starting that job with the Astros. And then a year later, my wife was done with her time at Houston Baptist, and just kind of organically, she started, training some folks, and it developed into what we're doing now, which is, we work with primarily middle school all the way up through professional athletes and Olympic athletes and every sport that you can think of, guys and gals. Since we're dealing with a younger population, that not a lot of them are driving themselves, or at least some of them aren't. There were parents that were either sitting out in the parking lot or dropping off and picking up. And so it didn't take long for our, to build an adult client base as well. So it's been a lot of fun. We don't have kids of our own, and so it's been fun to see, to work with and to give a great experience to these developing athletes, more so than just a place to come lift, but to feel like you're part of a family, and we've been able to do that, and it's been fun. One example is a 7th grader that we started with, that we worked with through high school. He went to University of Houston, and he was in Major League camp this year with the Mariners. And so, to see that whole process and be a small part of it is pretty cool.
Just kind of wrapping things up a little bit. So one of the last things that we talked about it a couple of days ago with Aaron, and when we're on this point of technology and things like that, doing different measurables and all this kind of stuff. Can you just kind of, with the direction baseball is going from a technology standpoint, can you just kind of talk about some of the benefits that you think that are going to come out of it, and maybe what are some of the potential pitfalls from it as well?
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've spent some time as an associate scout for both the Red Sox and the Cubs, and so I got a chance to be on that side of things, and I understand that the need or the desire for numbers or something that you can compare athlete A to athlete B across the board, regardless of your competition, things like that. So I understand that, but I think what it's swung so heavily that way that, I've chatted with some agents and things like that, so you've got at the major league level these unbelievable tools, but in some cases not the best baseball IQ. So at some point, as a supplement to evaluating a player, the measurables have some validity to them. But at the same time, at some point, you got to put some rubber to the road. And I don't want the scrappy guy who may not run the best 60 or have the best exit velocity or may not light up a radar gun, but the dude can play. I don't want him to get overlooked, just because the numbers don't fit. And I touched on it earlier. When I was in high school, I fit the mold for a right-handed pitcher, but what if I was 5'11" or 5'10"? Does that mean I wasn't that good? And there's organizations that'll, just if you don't fit the profile, you may not. So I think there's certainly some benefit from an analysis standpoint. Some of the stuff that you can do with Rapsodo now, in pitch design and things like that, there's some stuff there. But when you're saying yes or no on a player based on things that aren't really necessarily between the lines, I've always fought against that. But I from having been on the scouting side, that's the first thing that they're going to ask for. And so it's an unfortunate, there's some benefit there. I mean, it can supplement your true evaluation, but like I said, at some point I want to see you put some rubber to the road.
Gonna ask if any of our coaches have any further questions, but just kind of about wrapping things up. But before I ask and see if anybody has any more questions, I just wanted to tell you, thanks for being a part of this today. We really appreciate it. Was hoping to get a chance to connect with you maybe this summer. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Maybe the following summer. And just to let you know, from us coaches to the players, we're just trying to continue the legacy of guys like yourself that have gone through the program and continue that tradition and compete at a high level. And it's just, and you're a part of that. You set the tone, and we just try to continue and those traditions. And thank you for everything. And just I really appreciate your time today. So thank you.
Well, it goes both ways. Thank you for reaching out to me. And I feel honored to get a chance to chat with you guys. And I can't see all the faces up there, but, I just know that there's an old dude with a gray beard that is right there with you in terms of, I know you had a season pulled out from underneath you. And so, I want to, from the Joliet Catholic family, to say that we're, certainly behind you. I'm a long ways away, but, I'm always proud to have come from that program, and just wish you guys the best and stay after it. Hopefully we'll get back to some version of normal soon. And like I said, I just want you to, and Coach, if anybody who wants to reach out, you can pass along any of my contact information. If you can, anybody can use it as a resource, feel free. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. Bart, Goose, Quiggs, anybody have any questions? Or Bart, maybe you want to say hi? Or
how you doing, buddy?
What's up, Bart?
Hey, I like the beard. I can't believe how big that is. Is that something you've had for a while?
I started messing with it when things started going poorly up top. But yeah, I've let it eat a little bit here during this whole stay-at-home thing. So yeah.
So do you ever make it up this way now? Is mom and dad still up here, or?
No, my folks, we moved here in 2008. My folks moved back to Kansas that same year, so I haven't been back in quite a while, and I miss it. I desperately want to get back up there at some point, and I'll be, rattling your guys' cage when I come up there. I would love to come up and catch a game one of these springs.
Well, I'm gonna try to jump on Jared's coattails one of these summers down in Houston, and try to get in that dugout. So we'll hook up when we get down there. It's good to see you, though. You look great.
Absolutely. Again, I can't tell you how much I appreciate being a part of this.
And my
It was
suggestion:
awesome.
stay out of here in the spring because our weather is all over the place. We're in a polar vortex right now in the middle of May. So,
Part of the reason for Florida State and Arizona was I was about ready to stop playing baseball in cold weather. So there was a little method to my madness there.
All right. Well, thanks again, Barry.
Thanks, Barry.
Appreciate everything, and we'll be in touch for sure.
Absolutely. Please stay in touch, and best of luck to you guys as you head off into the summer. And thanks for letting me be a part of it.
All right. Thanks, Barry. Take care.
We'll see you, buddy.
Take care.
Thanks, Barry.
You got it.